There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud. It's what women are actually talking about on Monday, the 4th of December. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, the women recruiting porn partners at Schoolies Week. And the article every working mother is sharing in her group chats today, and not for good reasons. And do you have a third space in your life? If you don't, this is why you need one.
The countdown is over, with thousands of school leavers ready to hit the Gold Coast for Schoolies Week.
It's so much fun. We've just been going out partying. We've been going to the beach.
What happens at Schoolies Week? Drinking, dancing, pashing, a little dabbling in substances perhaps, and guzzling red frogs. This is what I imagine. I don't know. I've never been to one. But also this year, something a little more risque and capitalist is happening at Schoolies Week. Some female OnlyFans creators have been all over the news cycle for recruiting their latest co-stars from the cohort of male school leavers partying in places like the Gold Coast. Now, if you're not familiar with OnlyFans, here's a little bit of background as I understand it. It's a place where you pay to follow creators you like, to watch them do things you like to watch them doing. And that might include, often but not always, nudity or having sex. Two young female creators on the platform decided that Schoolies Week might be an excellent place to scout for talent to be in their sex videos. They are British expat Bonnie Blue, who's 24. I assume that these are their OnlyFans
What a great
names.
name.
Mm-hmm. And Brisbane-based Leilani May, who's 25. And they both posted on social media inviting 18-year-old school leavers in Surfers Paradise to take part in their porn videos. They said that they'd start getting messages about this time of year from young men who were saying, I'm going to be on the Gold Coast. Can we make some content together? And the women had always thought that they would limit their partners to other professional content creators.
Sorry, I just love this new vernacular. Can we make some content together? Is that a euphemism for
Yes, it is.
let's have sex?
That's exactly what it's a euphemism for. And so these women said that they'd usually limited that to professional content creators, but thought this year, why not branch out? Immediately, these women were accused of being predatory, and they have gone public and gone to great lengths to publicise their accounts. I mean, to reassure everyone that what they're doing is entirely legal and ethical.
Hi. So when they come in, we introduce ourselves. I'm Bonnie.
I'm Leilani.
And we explain to them what's going to happen, and the first things we do is check their ID, which we've already done beforehand, and we get them to sign a consent form. Obviously, either when they've done the consent form, at any point they change their mind, they're more than welcome to.
While they're doing the consent form, we get a photo of their license, front and back. After the consent form is signed, get a photo of them holding their license underneath their face, and then I will scan the consent form, and then from there...
I basically they don't need to do all the paperwork.
And then from there, it's pretty much, you can get into filming, or you can get into talking about what's going to happen filming-wise. If
so
what
far.
they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Also our own boundaries of what we do on camera too.
Yeah.
The women say that they can make up to $30,000 a day on OnlyFans. And this new sales tactic has made headlines around the world. I saw this story in the New York Post, all over the place. And I don't know what I think about it. So I want you two to help me decide. Not that it matters really what I think about it, I suppose, but who wants to help me figure this out? Jessie, is it problematic to be recruiting your porn partners from school leavers?
I have gone back and forth on this so many times. And I know it's an imperfect thought experiment, but this is one that's playing out over the internet and I think within the minds of a lot of parents all over Australia. If you had an 18-year-old daughter who just went to Schoolies and you've got male sex workers, that's their line of work, and they put a call out and say, hey, if you're 18, you can be in my sex video that can potentially make me tens of thousands of dollars. You're not going to get a cut, but you can be in mine. I'm going to check your ID. I'm going to check that you're not drunk. But that video will live on forever. That's the thing about consent and the internet is that you might decide 3 months down the track that you don't want it there anymore and they can take it off their site. True. It exists.
The women have said that the men also get to choose if they want their faces in it. But as you say, Jessie, once they've made that choice, they've made that choice.
And they don't use names. It's like Schoolies A, Schoolies B, Schoolies C.
So then your child comes back from Schoolies, let's say it's a female, and you've discovered they have been targeted by a man to be in their sex video, and now that exists until the day that person dies. How do we feel about that?
When you say targeted, couldn't
targeted
you just
is
say they've been given the opportunity and they've made a decision as the young, imperfect adults that they are?
Well, this is where the question of adulthood becomes interesting,
Not that making the decision is necessarily the wrong one. Let's not put judgment on this.
Yes, but, I mean, we can go into like the neuroscience of the brain, but 18-year-olds don't have a fully developed brain, right? They make stupid decisions all the time.
Adulthood has to start somewhere, Jessie.
Adulthood
we can't say, you're not an adult till you're 25.
We know that this is legal. That's not in question. They have checked all the boxes there. Is this ethical? Is this moral? Is this good? No, it's not. And our gut feeling that this isn't good for the world is correct.
Ooh, that's interesting.
I don't know about that. I mean, my daughter just got back from Schoolies. I've also had a son go to Schoolies. So I've got a bit of experience as a Schoolies parent. I never went to Schoolies myself.
How would you honestly feel if one of your children did this?
Oh, I'd feel terrible.
Yeah.
I would feel terrible.
I might never know, let's be honest.
Well, that's also true. So remember that when something's on OnlyFans, it's not on the open internet. Someone has to pay to watch it. However, who knows what might happen to that in the future. I also really didn't know how to feel about this. I bristle at this idea of comparing, or how would we feel if it was men? It's just very different. Like, the history, the power dynamics of sex, of women being exploited, I just don't think it is comparable.
So do you think that females in this context can't exploit men? They're being exploited. Well, I guess if they're signing a context.
They're being exploited?
I just think it's interesting because
they just get to have sex with some hot chicks.
See, so we're assuming that every man, all any man wants, and this was a question on the project actually, they said, what's in it for them? And one of the women said, what's not in it for them? We are reducing men to think that all they want is sex with hot women.
But some of them do, Jessie. It's not compulsory.
No, you get to choose whether or not you want to do it.
I know, but I just think that we've got to expect.
You don't arrive at Schoolies, get a wristband and get ushered into a room to have sex with someone to put on the internet. That's not what happens.
Yes, but I think that we're playing into some unhelpful stereotypes here, and the idea that men always hold the power, even when they're younger, even when they're not getting paid, even when the women are the rich ones.
Sorry.
Like that.
No. Yeah. You're 100% right about that. I'm not saying that men always hold the power. I'm just saying it's not necessarily a direct comparison because I would feel differently if it was my daughter to if it was my son.
You?
Yeah, of course I would. I asked my daughter what she thought, and she was on your team. She thought it was horrifying, morally, ethically, didn't think that these young men were, and she's clearly spent quite a lot of time with such men over the last week, were in a position to understand the consequences of their decisions. Not because they were drunk, let's be very clear, but because they were young.
Yeah, but
my horny.
Children are learning about the internet and what you put up there stays forever and at primary school, right? Like, so I think that if you've had 10 years of internet education, they probably do understand.
And also the law says that at 16 in most states, you can consent to sex.
Yes. The reason I find this troubling is because I feel icky about it. But does the fact that I feel icky about it mean it's unethical? Or does that just mean it offends my particular sensibilities? Because I don't think I would feel differently about it if it was my daughter. I think either way I would feel like, oh God. What I would mostly feel is I would never want to see that, of course. That's what I would absolutely think. I'm just going to say it. I think I'm a bit disappointed that that's what you wanted to do.
She's not angry. She's just disappointed.
They don't give a shit whether or not the adults in the situation are disappointed. They're like, I'm young and I'm having fun and I'm doing it and this is on the menu. This wasn't on the menu when we were younger, right? Like, so this is where I land with my ickiness because I was going to say, porn's been around forever, but it's an entirely different planet. And the idea that these women are basically owning their following, making their own money from it, making all the choices. I might feel icky about it, but it's not necessarily unethical in any way. But one of the things I wondered about it is I wonder what the female schoolies think about it. Is there anything in this dynamic that makes things worse for young women? Because I was thinking about the hypersexualized culture that is certainly still part of sort of party culture in young people in Australia and in plenty of other places, where this idea of women should be up for it and are you up for it and aren't you up for it and what I'm allowed to do to you and all of that, even with all of the consent conversations we have. Does adding this into the mix too, that there are these beautiful, powerful young women saying, not only do I want to have sex with you, but this will be something that everybody will want to watch, and there's power and status in that. Because that's the other thing that's in it for the guys, right? It's the status of being like, I'm on Bonnie Blue's OnlyFans account. Everyone can watch how amazing I am at having sex with this hot lady. Does anything in that dynamic make things worse for the young women? That's what I was wondering about, because that's the only thing that I think is possibly dangerous.
I think it's an extraordinary model for consent. I mean, I think it is a live model of consent. It's like, here's what's going to happen. You can pull out at any time. You can. Here's exactly, let's talk about it. You have to be sober. I think it's like a textbook example of consent.
But does it hold up? Does it give those men another sort of weapon to use against young women who are not necessarily up for it? Do you know what I mean?
Let's not pretend that having sex in front of a camera with a woman who is trying to appease and excite and entertain a paying fan base is anything like having sex with another 18-year-old in a private room with the lights off. Like, it's completely different. The type of sex you have is different. What they will want, what they want to perform, how they want to do it, what noises she makes, what she asks for, all of that is different.
So that can seep out into the real world, to the young women who are in the real world with these guys.
And there was another red flag.
But how is that different, Jessie, to the fact that by the time they get to Schoolies, those 18-year-old boys and girls, but particularly boys, will have watched hundreds, if not thousands of hours of porn?
At this point, do we just kind of wipe our hands and go, oh, well, sex is now something that we all do on the internet? And they said in this project interview that some of the men they were having sex with were virgins. This was the first time they were having sex. Let's talk about the power dynamic there. Like, yes, there might be a claim to, oh, I'm on so-and-so's OnlyFans, but this is their first sexual experience.
I would say I doubt that.
But also I would say that's a tale as old as time.
It's also a good marketing ploy.
There's a total cliche of like dads buying their son, sex for their 18. Like, the idea that a paid professional might be the person to initiate a young man into sex is not a new idea. The thing that's interesting here is that, as you both rightly say, like, porn culture is so pervasive now that it's also aspirational. Like, it's aspirational for these boys to want to be
lose their virginity
on these women,
on
camera. What I haven't seen reported, and maybe Jessie, is like, have these women been like absolutely overwhelmed with people wanting to do this? Like, is the demand as high as we imagine, or is it just an excellent publicity tactic? Because let's face it, for these women, it's gone around the world. Can you imagine what their follower count has done in the last week? So is it more of a publicity stunt than a real thing?
I think it's more of a publicity stunt. I don't think that they are being absolutely overwhelmed by people genuinely wanting to do it. Sending a message is one thing, but going through with it is another.
That's not what they're trying to do. All you need is one or two.
Yeah, they're marketing.
Yes, they're marketing so that you pay for it.
Money, yeah.
And this is a model that's been taken from the spring break model. This is happening in the US right now, and that's what's a bit worrying, is that this isn't just Schoolies 2023. This is a whole thing.
I remember Girls Gone Wild, that guy who I think went to jail, and he'd go around and film girls lifting up their shirts and flashing their boobs.
But I found the truth of this, how I feel, in a Daily Mail headline, which I've never had before. Oh. They used a term and I went,
it's nice when they nail it.
That's just it, Daily Mail. You've absolutely nailed it.
Go on.
And they said, these women are sleazy. And I went, I've never heard the word sleazy used.
I completely disagree.
I disagree too.
So can men only be sleazy?
I don't think it's sleazy. I think these women are business women.
Oh, so just because we're making money, everything is forgiven. I hate capitalism.
No,
I hate it.
I agree with you on that, Jessie. I don't think that's why I don't think they're sleazy. I don't have feelings about the women. You know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of like, good on them.
Yeah.
What I have issues about is about the cultural implications and how widespread it could go. The many, many things that young women are faced with all the time now, versions of what they're supposed to be. And is this just another one?
There's an article going around today that is having two different effects on working mothers. One is that it's making them cry, and the second is that it's making them lose their shit. It's called Kids Will Pay the Price in a Push for Universal Childcare, and it's written by parent writer and advocate Virginia Tapscott, who sometimes writes for Mamamia and whose articles we've discussed on the show before. Virginia is someone who doesn't believe in childcare for her children or any kind of formalised daycare. She's got four little kids now. Her article begins, thousands of Australian children screamed for their loving and able parents at daycare drop-off this week. Those who tired of screaming outwardly would have entered the latter stages of separation anxiety, despair and detachment. Parents think a toddler has settled in at daycare when really the child has learned that crying for help is no use. The interactions children have with an educator charged with the care of at least 3 other children will likely be less sequential and responsive than in a home environment. The infections they contract at daycare no doubt will reduce their quality of life, even at home. This can hardly be a practice where the rights or views of the child are considered.
Finally, we're making women feel like shit. Finally.
This has come in response to a speech given by Jessica Rudd, who heads up the Parenthood, which is an advocacy organisation for parents, and spoke at the National Press Club last week about the need for a universal childcare model. And one of the things she said was, women, we need you back in the workforce. And she stressed the importance of women's lives improving only when there is universal childcare, in a similar way to the way we have Medicare, from what I understand. Some of the other points that Virginia made in her article, which I assume is quoting various studies, she talks about babies entering daycare at 6 months old will grieve the absence of their primary caregiver before entering survival mode and attaching to the caregiver available to them. The quality of interactions they have with those who care for them and disruptions to the identity of this caregiver will determine their brain architecture for life and their sense of safety or lack thereof. We learn in our earliest months and it stays with us. Gosh, Holly, I'm going to fasten my seatbelts and turn down the volume of my headphones. To be clear, we don't want to send people after Virginia personally, but we are going to have a conversation. Holly, over to you. I'm hiding now.
I don't think I'm the only one, to be honest. I think Jessie also read this article and felt quite furious. I want to be clear, like Virginia herself, it's not about her. Well, it is because she chooses to write the articles in such an incendiary way. That opening about the children screaming when they get dropped off at daycare. I'm a writer. We're all writers. We know what tactics we're using.
It's a good opening paragraph.
It's bloody brilliant. And that ensures you'll keep reading as your anger rises to vomit out of your mouth. But it's so emotive.
How did it make you feel?
Furious. But it's interesting because I read a lot of what Virginia writes because she's a great writer, right? She's very smart. And she has this particular perspective that she argues, and she's right, is underrepresented in the media. That full-time parenting, I mean, all these terms are imperfect. We're all full-time parents, but are underrepresented in the public conversation for obvious reasons. Those of us having the public conversations are at work while we're having them. So it's like, it's tricky. So I get that she thinks that's an undervalued voice. It's entirely true that care work is undervalued 100%. There is nothing wrong with asking questions about whether or not the model that we've all convinced ourselves is the right one, which is we get back to work pretty much as quickly as we can so we can pay the bills. Is that good for kids? All that. It's all valid. But the thing about articles like this is it's like throwing a grenade into the lives of so many women who are already struggling, like literally struggling with paying bills for their families, but also emotionally struggling with all the judgment that then comes with it. The idea that we're ever going to make any progress about this while we are yelling at each other in these emotive tones, and I'm about to do it too, the reason why I get so defensive and so upset about this is it's someone coming for the most important thing in your life, right? My children's well-being. She argues in this piece that children who attend daycare may be lacking development of important brain functions. So she's basically arguing that my kids, and I'll be upfront about it, actually my daughter didn't go to daycare till she was 1. My son went when he was 9 months. But they have been in paid professional care the great majority of their life. She's basically telling me that I damaged my kids, that those decisions that I made were fundamentally bad for my kids. maybe they were decisions and maybe they weren't. For a lot of families, these are not decisions. They are not choices. Certainly in capital cities, who can live on one wage these days? I also get the argument about, well, maybe we all want too many things and we should downsize and downgrade, and do you really need to work that much and all that? It's all valid. But what she's doing is she's coming at my family
and your choices.
And my choices and my children and saying I fucked them up. The reason why it makes you so defensive is because there's a little kernel in you that goes, that might be true.
Oh, it's your worst fear.
The other conversation that is everywhere around the internet at the moment is what's wrong with kids these days. There was another big piece that got passed around a lot last week about behavioural issues in schools. Everybody's asking why diagnoses of behavioural issues are so high. Everybody's asking why kids are so anxious. Everyone's asking why, like all of these things. And so you get lobbed a grenade like this one that says, well, these children have never had secure attachment because from their very earliest moments, some selfish person, who apparently is their mother usually, has thrown them to a stranger. That poor little child has been screaming and looking around for mummy and mummy isn't there and it's screwed them up for life. Can we be surprised that this is what we're dealing with now? There's a bit of you that's like, maybe that's true and it's devastating. Jessie, do you feel differently reading this now than you would have done 6 months ago?
Yep.
Of course you do.
I feel completely
Because
different.
she's coming for you too.
Who's looking after your baby today?
She is with a babysitter who, by the way, she loves and she has
But does she though?
Day.
Or has she, as Virginia would say,
Does she
has just
scream all day?
chosen to attach to this babysitter in an inferior model than the way she would attach to you, Jessie?
Look, I just think it's funny that when you have a baby, the thing you get yelled at from health professionals, from other mums, from everyone is it takes a village. It takes a village. And every time you try and create a village, people yell at you. They just need you.
Yep.
And it's like,
People say you're a bad mother.
you're a bad mum. And it's like, oh, how about the village? I thought that maybe lots of people could love my child. And it's like, no. They just want you. They just want you. And everyone's a stranger till they're not, right? Like the nanny or the babysitter or the childcare educator is going to be a stranger for 5 minutes until they're not. And I asked out louders and my brothers who are childcare educators, I went, have I missed something? Is that true? Right now as we speak, these centres full of children crying. And unanimously, people have said, what? No?
But that's not what she's saying, Jessie.
Well,
what she's saying is, and this is exactly the same argument that I used to get all the time about controlled crying, which is called sleep training now, whatever it's called, is like, yes, they stop crying, but that doesn't mean they're not still anxious. And that's what she's saying. So she's not saying daycares are full of screaming children. She's saying they stopped screaming because they've learnt you're not coming back.
She said thousands of Australian children screamed for their loving and able parents at daycare, which loving and able is just a whole, that's loaded. And they don't, right? And what's
But then
funny,
she said they'll stop crying, but it doesn't mean they're not upset anymore.
She also made a comment later that childcare educators, it's 1 to every 3 or 4 children. That's the same with Virginia. She's 1 to every 3 or 4 children because she's at home with 4 kids. So, to criticise that isn't fair. The relationships that children form with those people in the childcare centre context, to have adults see different things in your children that they love and that they can bring out, they are going there to play and to cuddle and to learn new things and to be socialised and all of these wonderful things, right? Now, where I agree with her, and I have felt this since having a child, is that I do think that feminism as a political movement has been co-opted by capitalism. And by that I mean it's become a bit one note in terms of you have your baby, get back. I even found...
Start earning again as quickly as you can.
Start earning you can. And even we need you back, I thought was a little bit inflammatory. And I was even reading an article by a feminist publication that said out of all women in Australia aged 25 to 40 with young children, just 56% are participating in the workforce. And I thought the word just is loaded. Like, why does it have to be more?
Because we know that there's a gender pay gap. We know that women do not have the same amount of superannuation as men. We know that the fastest growing group of homeless people are postmenopausal women. Because of these big gaps, structural gaps, that happen from us leaving the workforce for a number of years to raise children.
There are so many economic ways to combat that without being like, you need to go straight back to work.
So Virginia's point very broadly, and I'm less emotional about this because it's like a long way in my past, and of course I had all of that guilt and all of those things. But from what I understand, the idea of universal childcare just means that everybody has the option. Doesn't mean everybody has to do it, right? But it's the broad understanding that we want to give parents, and let's be real, it's still mothers, options and choices. And from what I can see, that Virginia is arguing against that because her basic position is that it's always better for a child to be at home with their mother or their father or their primary carer.
And the thing that I find really hard is like, if that's Virginia's choice, that's great, right? But Virginia sees, and I know it's not just Virginia, this sounds very like coming at this one person, but the problem with this viewpoint is they're going after any policy changes or any structural changes that make it easier for families to access childcare, because that's all that this is about.
Yeah.
The idea of a best start, which I know Virginia has a real issue with that terminology, but the idea of best start is that there should be 3 days of childcare available to every Australian child at an affordable level, no matter what. What Virginia's arguing is like that's kind of war on caregivers and devaluing care. And I kind of understand that point, but making it harder.
But no, it's not. By her argument, it's just devaluing care at home by a blood relative. It's not devaluing care, because I know for a fact that my children got better care, better stimulation, a better start by going to daycare and preschool than if I'd have been at home with them 7 days a week.
But that's what she says. She says the way that the feminists, and in this argument, she's talking about the parenthood, which is, as you say, the CEO is Jess Rodden in response to this speech. She says that the feminists only seem to value care if a paid professional is doing it, and they don't value it if a family member's doing it. Again, heaps of sympathy for that argument.
Yeah.
But pushing against any legislation or funding that's going to make it easier for Australian families to be able to get good quality care for their children, particularly for women who might be in single income families, who might be in all kinds of situations, it's just not good for women. I don't see how it is good for women in any way.
She's saying, though, because the motivation is productivity, and she's trying to say it's the Productivity Commission that's saying we need women back at work because it's good for the economy. And for every policy that's made in that direction, is there a cost in terms of the cost of living? There are a lot of people I know, and I would include myself in this, who would actually love to have more time with my child and more time in this first year. But because of having a mortgage and because of cost of living stuff at the moment.
Yeah, but Virginia would argue
you want to.
Yeah, but Virginia would argue that you don't have to buy a house in an and I don't want to get into personal things, but what I mean is there is an argument on this side that's like we're all caught up in the capitalist rat race that's like, I need to have a big house in a lovely suburb. I'm not saying you do, but you know what I mean. I need to have overseas holidays. I need to have a nice car. I need to have this. And that's what's pushing us all to be working 24/7. And I think what this argument is saying is that are our values really out of whack? And should we be going, maybe I could earn less and my family could cost less and I could work less? And I get all that. I really understand it. It's a conversation I have with my friends all the time. What's the most valuable thing we have? It's our time, right? I get it, but I stand by the idea that writing an opinion piece like this with an intro like that just all its effect is to make a whole lot of women in particular feel like they may have either fucked their kids up retrospectively, are doing so now, or it's their fault that there are all these issues with teenagers and young adults now. It's all because their parents were working too much and didn't give them enough secure attachment. And you're just like, what do I do about that?
Mamamia Out Loud!
If you want to make Out Loud part of your routine 5 days a week, we release segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays just for Mamamia subscribers. To get full access, follow the link in the show notes, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers.
Hey, Ross. Listen, you want anything to drink? Because I'm heading up there.
Yeah, I'll take a coffee. Thanks, man.
Sure.
Do you have a third place? For most of us, home is our first place. Work is our second place. And for much of human history, we've had a third place. So think like a religious setting, the town square, the pub or a soccer field or the library or a friend's house. It's a place where you can hang out, make new friends, and even court a romantic interest.
That's where Starbucks was revolutionary.
I kept thinking about Friends, the show Friends. Yeah. It was like they had obviously where they lived and then they had their work and then they had that cafe. way.
In England, it's the pub. There's a pub on every corner and it's the third place.
In what I was reading about
That's not
this,
healthy. I'm not saying it is. Way too much alcohol consumption. But it forms the basis of a community centre.
I was reading a little bit about this and it said we almost went from the Friends generation to the office generation where all socialising happened inside the office. And that's just an interesting switch. Here's what Cole the Science Dude says about the third place on TikTok.
One important question that you should be asking yourself is, do you have a third place? The term a third place was originally coined by the sociologist Ray Oldenburg in his 1989 book, The Great Good Place. Third places are inherently social. It's somewhere that you go to be around other people, to meet up with current friends and make new ones, to court romantic interests, to feel a sense of community with the fellow members of your city, and to build a sense of place. Third places are churches, they're barbershops, clubs, public libraries, bookstores, cafes, anywhere that you can go to be around people.
Third places are how we create and build community, and the question becomes, is a lack of a third space contributing to our poor mental health? A theory has emerged that our third place might have become the internet, which feels awfully depressing. Mia, do you think we're missing a third place in our lives?
I think we're also missing a second place for a lot of people now after COVID because of working from home. So, you know, I'm a big believer in people getting back to the office, not necessarily full-time, but this idea that everything's better if you work from home, I disagree, because then you collapse two spaces into just having one place.
And often that third place can happen in between the two. Maybe it is drinks after work, or maybe it is going to the gym, or when you make the one, it's like you can miss out on various others.
Yes, I agree. So if you flatten it down to one place, it's much harder to even get to a second place if you've only got one place. For me, I think that's chilling and my brain's exploding about that idea of the third place being the internet, because I think that's true. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think that not everybody has the ability or the time or has the connection. They don't have a church. They might not be able to play sport. So what does your third place become? You can find that third place online, even though, again, you won't leave your house. For me, my third place, I was thinking about it, is Westfield shopping malls. That's my third place. Yeah, I like being around people, but I don't necessarily want to talk to anybody.
Well, that's the thing. I'm wondering, because I was thinking the same for the last, 5 months or whatever. That's been either going to the park or just being outside my home.
I was going to say, for people with kids under 10, the third place is the park.
The thing about a park, though, is that you often speak to people and there's a social element. I'm trying to work out if Westfield counts.
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does, because you don't talk to people engage.
You can talk to people in a shop. Of course
you
can.
But
do you meet your friends at Westfield and hang out with them and have a coffee?
No,
and
I think you're being too prescriptive. The third place, and this is why Starbucks built an entire business model on it, and so did, I think, Barnes & Noble maybe a little bit in the early days, but Starbucks, it was revolutionary, the idea of going to a coffee shop with a laptop. People have always met other people in coffee shops, like on Friends, but it became a place where I'm not at work, I'm not at home, I'm around other people, but I don't necessarily know any of them. In the same way that you could go to church. You don't necessarily have to talk to anyone at church, but you can be doing something communal or sharing a space with other people.
But isn't it about community building? Yeah. Isn't that what it is? Because I was thinking about this, and I was thinking when I lived in Sydney and I lived by the beach, because everybody lived in little apartments, including us, our third space was the beach. So every single weekend morning, whatever, we'd all just meet down there, and you'd always see people you knew, either by arrangement or just by coincidence. That was our community hall, right? When the kids were younger, definitely the park. You'd be there and you'd meet your friends there and you'd talk there and you'd meet people there, and that is a third space. And because it's Australia, they could be outdoors, right? In England, a bit less, probably be the place with a cooler climate.
WhatsApp groups that now.
They can't replace it. I don't believe that digital communication can replace it. And I think that the thing that's interesting is that those very clear third spaces that came to my head. So when I was young, it would have been the pub, no question, right? You'd meet your friends there, you'd talk, you'd know the locals, you'd know the people behind the bar, and you build a community around it. As I got older and the kids got older, definitely a public space like a park or the beach. Now I'm in a different phase. I don't think I have a third place in the same way. For a lot of people, it's a gym.
Yep.
I've been thinking a lot about community lately and how you build community when we all are getting so much of the information we're consuming at the minute is telling us that ultimately that's what's going to save us, right? is forming connections with other people and giving a shit about other people who you might not necessarily know, but they are connected to you somehow, is what's going to save us from all kinds of things, from poor mental health to arguing on the internet to how we vote, whatever, is community building. And this is so important. Part of that, right, is that if you don't have a place where you do happen to bump into people who aren't your people necessarily, but you rub up against them. That's why mothers groups and things like that are great, right? And I'm trying to think of other ways you could replicate this, maybe a running group or whatever. But you meet people who you don't work in your industry, probably vote differently, think differently, live differently, but they just happen to live in your neighborhood, which obviously is self-selecting to a point, and have had a baby at the same time as you. That is the only thing you have in common, and you're thrown up against each other. And so you build these connections that are really important. And how do we, because even on a third space on the internet, you're probably there because you will think something similar.
And the difference with the internet, I was listening to an Ezra Klein interview a few months back about the art of hanging out. It was talking about adolescence and how our strongest relationships are often in adolescence, when you'd have a friend over all weekend. And a lot of it you wouldn't talk and you'd sit there. And school had us do that as well. Like you would turn up every day and some days you were shitty and some days you were funny and some days you were sad. The intimacy was born by all of those emotions. And this person said that it's like having a front door that locks has almost ruined that because, and back to sort of the village idea, even postpartum, it used to be that people were in and out of your house all the time. And she was saying that the idea now that I can lock my door if I'm having a bad day and go, I actually don't want to see anyone, has been the worst thing for our mental health because we can select when we're sociable, when we would like to put ourselves out there. And I've found that my relationships were strongest when it was like I used to sit in the car next to a friend for 3 hours after we went to the movies and talk about nothing, and like it was that hanging out.
Getting ready together was always my favourite part of the night. And I find that my capacity for socialising, even with my close friends,
is
shorter. I really miss that, the companionable sort of silence where it's not so intense of and like, let's catch up, how have you been?
That's why we like travelling together, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Like when Mamamia Out Loud goes on tour and the three of us travel with producer and a few other team members we love, there's lots of incidental hanging out and we all know each other well enough that you don't have to be talking all the time, although frequently we are talking all the time. And it's that like rubbing up in each other's
pull
space.
Your phone out and just look at your phone.
And it's allowing, that's what this said, is that it's allowing moments of boredom. We're terrified of being bored with friends because we think it means we're boring. Guys, I've just had an epiphany though. Do you think this is our third place?
Yes.
Think about it, because it doesn't feel like work. This doesn't feel like work. We'll go and work out there.
I think you're right.
I think this might be our third place.
Building community.
Yeah.
With our Out Louders.
Out Louders, tell us what your third space is. Maybe it's also listening to this show while
Maybe
you're
it's the
doing
Out Louders
whatever.
Facebook group.
Because people say that because you can be listening to us wherever you might be, in your car or on the train or in walking or whatever. Tell us, but maybe you've got another third space. Let us know what yours is.
I have a quick recommendation before we go for a Christmas present. You know when you nail a present and you just go, I'm actually a really good person now.
My family's doing Christmas presents for the first time in a long time this year.
Oh my God.
And
I didn't know
I'm
that
a bit screwed because I'm out of practice. So
right.
Can we please, Out Louders, we're going to have a bit of an ongoing series of
gift brainstorming.
What you get people. Okay, so it's a little bit pricey, but it's worth it. And I would suggest going in with a few people. So there's 4 of us, and the 4 of us went in and we bought this for our dad for Father's Day. Best gift we ever got. It is called a skylight frame, and you can get it on Amazon. And it's a digital photo frame. It doesn't have to be this one. I think Officeworks does some. You can probably find one cheaper. This one is $249. But what it does is I can sit, and I do this every weekend, I send photos from my phone to my dad's digital photo frame at home. Yeah. And he has it set up in the house like it's just Luna, like it's 1,000 photos of Luna. And he'll be sitting there and like get so excited to see what photos have been put on there.
Oh my God.
Anyone in the family can send them.
Do they have to do anything? Because this sounds like the perfect gift for an older person who doesn't really understand technology.
Yeah.
So what you do is, and I think we bought one of these as well for Luca's grandfather, and what we did do is we did set it up before we left. It takes maybe 5 minutes. It's basically like an email address that you just send photos to this email address and it all goes up.
And is it big like a computer screen or is it small like a photo frame?
Kind of like an iPad.
And does it look like a computer screen in the room?
No,
it looks like a photo frame, but it's changing. It's constantly changing. So it's just a slideshow of photos.
But the amazing thing about it, and I do this as well, is you send photos to it.
So it can be the first time they've seen them.
Perfect for all my family who are overseas.
Yes.
Brent just went to New Zealand to visit his dad who isn't very well at all and he's in like a care home. We printed out pictures to put around his room because his room's very sterile. This would be so perfect.
Yeah, because older people also aren't always on social media or they don't understand or they, you know, they're
he hadn't
whatever.
seen the kids for ages.
No. So, and, you know, I've set it up with sending old photos and just different photos. Like, it's just great. And you just, whenever you remember, you just send
There'll
it.
be one troll who sends a few funny photos and thinks something funny, something rude. Luke is waiting for his moment. But it's all a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Skylight frame.
Highly recommend.
Best gift ever bought.
That's exciting.
If you're looking for something to get into your ears now because you want to hear more of us, we're a little bit on fire, I have to say, if I do say so myself. We're pretty enjoying doing the show. I hope you're enjoying listening to the show.
We're loving being back together.
We talked on a subscriber episode about all the things you get better at doing with age and which stages of your life you're supposedly going to be the happiest and most confident and different things. And we compared notes on where we all are and whether we agree. A link to the episode will be in the show notes. It's very funny.
Thank you for listening to Australia's #1 news and pop culture show. This episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman with audio production by Leah Porges. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye. Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do it. There's a link in the episode description.